The restaurant glowed with soft amber lights, its crystal chandeliers casting golden reflections across polished wooden tables. The scent of roasted garlic and rosemary drifted through the air, mingling with the lively hum of voices. It was meant to be a celebration, a farewell dinner for one of the company's long-serving managers. But as the evening unfolded, it would become something entirely different, something unforgettable. At the center table sat Daniel, a man who wore confidence like a tailored suit. His laughter carried easily, rich and magnetic, drawing colleagues toward him as though he were the natural centerpiece of every room. He had built a reputation as both charming and dependable, the kind of man people trusted, admired, and leaned on. Tonight, though, his charisma seemed brighter than usual, tinged with an almost restless energy. His smile stretched wide, but it flickered too often toward one direction, toward Emily. Emily sat diagonally across from him, her posture relaxed yet attentive, every tilt of her head a silent acknowledgement of his words. She was younger, perhaps by a decade, with ambition shining in her eyes and an ease that made her popular among colleagues. There was something effortless about the way she leaned closer when Daniel spoke, her laughter sliding in just a second too quickly, as if she were in tune with him in ways others couldn't quite grasp. Their connection hung in the air like a secret melody only they could hear. And then there was Sophia. She sat beside Daniel, her hands resting lightly on the table, her presence quiet but commanding in its own way. She had always been the kind of woman who didn't need to demand attention. Her composure, her thoughtful gaze, her calm elegance did that for her. Tonight she had dressed in a deep emerald dress, one that flattered without boasting, her dark hair cascading in gentle waves over her shoulders. To an outsider, she looked every part the proud, supportive wife, attending her husband's work function. But her eyes, sharp, observant, calculating, betrayed a storm beneath the surface. From the moment they entered the restaurant, Sophia had noticed the subtle exchanges, the fleeting glances, the inside jokes whispered quickly and followed by stifled laughter. The way Daniel's body angled ever so slightly toward Emily, as though drawn by some invisible tether. It wasn't the first time she'd noticed such things, but tonight it felt undeniable, glaring, even brazen, and though no one else seemed to pay attention, Sophia's intuition screamed at her to keep watching. The dinner stretched on with courses of seared salmon, tender cuts of beef, and delicate glasses of wine that clinked cheerfully in toast after toast. Stories of office mishaps, triumphs, and inside humor filled the table, and laughter rose in waves. To anyone else, the evening was flawless, a well-crafted memory of camaraderie and goodbyes. But to Sophia, each laugh, each smile, each gesture was another thread, weaving into a tapestry of betrayal she could no longer ignore. She noticed how Emily's hand lingered on Daniel's arm when she leaned across him to pass a dish. She saw how Daniel's eyes softened when Emily spoke, his attention sharper than it ever was at home during their late-night conversations. And she caught the hushed whisper, followed by the two of them chuckling at something no one else was privy to. It was the kind of intimacy that went unnoticed in the chaos of a group, but screamed loudly to someone whose life was intertwined with one of the players. Sophia swirled her wine glass, the deep red liquid catching the light like blood and crystal. She smiled when spoken to, laughed when expected, but her mind was a machine. Every look, every touch, every half-finished sentence cataloged and analyzed. Her suspicions, long dismissed as paranoia, now sat before her in plain sight, brazen and shameless. Across the table, the soon-to-be departed manager beamed, soaking in the warmth of farewell speeches and affectionate toasts. He was the reason for the evening, yet slowly unnoticed, the spotlight shifted. People leaned toward Daniel, eager for his stories, while Emily's laughter rippled like background music, tying itself seamlessly to his voice. It was subtle, yet it pulled the focus, and Sophia felt it like a dagger twisting in her chest. The air carried on with joviality, but for Sophia the restaurant was no longer just a place of celebration. It was a theater stage. Each colleague was an unsuspecting audience member, each exchange a performance, each smile a mask hiding something darker. And in the center of that stage were Daniel and Emily, spinning a tale of loyalty and camaraderie that rang hollow to her ears. Sophia's grip tightened around her glass, her pulse quickening. She didn't know exactly how the evening would end, but she knew one thing with bone-deep certainty. She wouldn't leave this dinner pretending any longer. Something was going to break tonight. Something was going to be revealed. And when it was, there would be no going back. Sophia's smile remained fixed, polite and practiced, but her mind slipped elsewhere. Every laugh Daniel shared with Emily, every touch that lingered too long, peeled away another layer of denial she had built around herself. For months, Sophia had wrestled with questions she never wanted answers to. Questions that clawed at her during sleepless nights, when Daniel returned late, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers, offering excuses too neat, too rehearsed. The flashbacks came uninvited. She remembered the first time suspicion pricked her, a late evening when Daniel claimed he was finishing a project at the office. She had called his phone to ask if he wanted dinner saved. His voice, rushed and oddly hushed, told her he was in a meeting. Yet in the background she heard laughter. A woman's laughter. When she pressed later, he brushed it aside, saying she must have misheard, that he'd been on a conference call. She wanted to believe him. She forced herself to, but the seed had been planted, and it grew quietly, persistently. In the weeks that followed, other moments came. The late-night text messages he angled his phone away to read. The sudden gym sessions that left him energized but distracted. The way he stopped asking about her day, offering instead vague nods while his thoughts drifted elsewhere. He had grown distant, and though she told herself it was work stress, her heart whispered otherwise. And now, watching him tonight, she realized her heart had been right all along. Every glance toward Emily confirmed it. Every shared smile spoke louder than words ever could. Around the table, the atmosphere remained light. A colleague teased Daniel and Emily, calling them the office's unofficial duo, joking about how they finished each other's sentences in meetings. The table erupted in laughter. Daniel grinned, and Emily flushed slightly, brushing it off with mock embarrassment. But to Sophia, the laughter felt like mockery. Did they not see it? Or were they all simply blind to what stared them in the face? She sipped her wine slowly, letting the bitterness of the tannins ground her. On the surface, she maintained the image of the devoted wife. Inside, however, a storm gathered, silent but unstoppable. She thought of the nights she had tried to confront Daniel, only to be met with dismissive chuckles. "You're imagining things," he had told her. "You're overthinking." And when her tone sharpened, he twisted it, accusing her of being insecure, of not trusting him. The irony cut her now. Trust had been her gift, her vow, her constant offering, and here in the glow of this restaurant, she saw how cheaply it had been spent. Her gaze shifted back to Emily. The younger woman's laugh was high-pitched, light, careless. She had that look of someone who believed she was untouchable, cloaked in the safety of secrecy. Sophia studied her carefully, the manicured nails tapping against her wineglass, the tilt of her neck as she leaned in, the way her eyes flickered toward Daniel with a mixture of admiration and ownership. Ownership. That was what Sophia saw now. Emily didn't just admire Daniel. She believed she had him. A colleague leaned toward Sophia, complimenting her dress, pulling her briefly out of her thoughts. She smiled graciously, thanked them, and turned back to her plate. Yet she barely tasted the food. Her mind sharpened into resolve. She could no longer pretend. The pretense had become unbearable, the cracks in the facade too wide to ignore. But how? That question pressed at her. Should she speak to Daniel privately, after the dinner, behind closed doors? Or should she do what a part of her secretly craved? Tear the curtain down right here, in front of every witness, every colleague who had ever laughed with him, admired him, trusted him. Her dignity battled with her fury, each demanding its own justice. The evening moved on. The plates were cleared, the chatter grew livelier, and Sophia felt the moment drawing nearer. She watched Daniel as he leaned into a story, Emily laughing so hard she clutched his arm for balance. Something inside Sophia snapped, not loudly, not visibly, but with a quiet, decisive click. The truth would come out tonight. Whether she whispered it or shouted it, whether it shattered softly or exploded in chaos, it would no longer be contained. For the first time in months, Sophia felt strangely calm. Her fears, her doubts, her sleepless nights, they had all led here, to this dinner table, to this moment. And as she glanced around at the colleagues who remained blissfully unaware, she thought, let them laugh now. Soon laughter will not be what fills this room. The facade had cracked. Soon it would crumble. And when it did, nothing, not Daniel, not Emily, not even Sophia herself, would ever look the same again. The clatter of cutlery softened as the evening centerpiece drew closer. Plates had been cleared, glasses refilled, and the manager, being honored, dabbed the corners of his mouth with a napkin, smiling with the gentle pride of someone who had earned both respect and affection. Soon the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived, the farewell speeches. A senior colleague stood first, raising a glass and offering words of praise. The room warmed with nostalgia as stories of shared projects and long nights at the office rolled out. Laughter echoed, bittersweet and fond, as years of memories condensed into a few heartfelt minutes. When the speech ended, applause thundered across the table. "Daniel," someone called out, their voice carrying above the chatter. "You should say a few words. You've worked with him the longest." All eyes turned to Daniel, who rose with practiced ease. He adjusted his jacket, his confident smile never faltering. The room seemed to lean into him, captivated before he even spoke. Sophia watched carefully, her pulse steady despite the tightening in her chest. Daniel lifted his glass, his voice carrying with effortless charm. He spoke of teamwork, of the bonds formed in the crucible of deadlines and challenges. He sprinkled humor through his speech, drawing laughter at just the right moments. People nodded, smiling, touched by his sincerity. It was the kind of speech only Daniel could give. Warm, engaging, magnetic. And then almost instinctively, Emily joined in. She stood beside him, her smile radiant, her eyes glowing with admiration. "Don't forget the time he saved us all with that last-minute presentation," she chimed, finishing his sentence as though they had rehearsed it. The crowd chuckled approvingly. Daniel laughed, leaning slightly toward her. "Ah, yes, how could I forget? Emily practically carried me through that week." Applause and laughter followed, but for Sophia the sound rang hollow. Her gaze sharpened, zeroing in on the two of them standing together. Daniel basking in attention, and Emily glowing at his side. It was a scene meant to celebrate another man's career. Yet somehow it had shifted into a performance by Daniel and Emily. A duet. Sophia's fingers tightened around her wineglass. Her mind replayed every late night, every "it's just work," every time she had silenced the nagging voice inside her. And now, here they were, standing shoulder to shoulder, sharing glances and finishing sentences, like a pair who had rehearsed not just this moment, but an entire secret life. "Daniel and Emily, the dream team," a colleague joked from the back of the room, sparking another round of laughter. Sophia's heart pounded. Dream team. The words clawed at her. They weren't just colleagues. She knew it. Deep down, she had always known it. Tonight was only the stage where the truth prepared to step into the light. The manager raised his glass again, thanking everyone. But before he could close the moment, another voice called out, "Sophia, would you like to say a few words as well? After all, Daniel's been such a support here. It would be lovely to hear from you." The room turned toward her, warm and expectant. Sophia felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. Daniel looked down at her quickly, his smile still fixed, but his eyes flickering with warning. A subtle shake of his head, almost imperceptible, begged her to decline. But Sophia rose gracefully. She smoothed the folds of her dress, her movements calm, deliberate. A hush settled as she lifted her glass, her posture regal. "I would be honored," she said softly. Her voice, though quiet, carried with surprising clarity. The chatter stilled. Forks paused mid-air. Even the restaurant's background music seemed to fade into silence. She began with pleasantries. How wonderful it was to see so much admiration for a colleague. How farewell dinners carried both joy and sorrow. She smiled at the manager, acknowledging his years of service. Her words were smooth, composed, just as they were expected to be. But then her tone shifted. almost imperceptibly. Of course, farewells also remind us of what truly matters: loyalty, trust, and the bonds we choose to protect. A ripple of attention passed through the room. Sophia's eyes, steady and unblinking, flicked briefly toward Daniel and Emily. Because in the end, she continued, her voice stronger now, it isn't just our work that defines us. It's who we are when no one is watching. The choices we make, the secrets we keep. Gasps were not audible. Not yet, but the air thickened. Daniel's smile faltered, his knuckles whitening as his hand gripped the back of his chair. Emily shifted uneasily, the color draining from her face. Sophia lowered her glass, her gaze unwavering. And sometimes, she added softly, farewell dinners aren't just about saying goodbye to colleagues. They're about saying goodbye to illusions. Silence fell, the kind of silence that suffocates, heavy and absolute. The room no longer looked at the manager being honored. Every eye was on Sophia, on Daniel, on Emily. The facade had slipped. The first crack had been spoken aloud. For a few long seconds, the restaurant seemed frozen in time. Glasses hovered mid-air, conversations stalled mid-breath. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning above, a cold whisper against the heat rising around the table. Sophia's words lingered like smoke, wrapping themselves around each person present. Goodbye to illusions. The phrase replayed in every mind, though none dared to speak. Daniel forced a chuckle, the sound brittle, unconvincing. My wife has a way with words, he said, trying to drag the moment back into the safe territory of humor. His eyes darted toward Sophia, silent pleading masked behind his smile. But Sophia wasn't finished. She turned slightly, her gaze sweeping across the room, meeting the eyes of colleagues who shifted in their seats under her calm intensity. You all see the surface, she said softly. The long hours, the hard work, the teamwork. What you don't see are the nights of unexplained absences, the phone calls taken in another room, the perfume that lingers when he comes home late. A few people gasped quietly. Forks clinked against plates as hands faltered. Sophia's eyes landed squarely on Emily now, unblinking, steady as stone. What you don't see, she continued, her voice sharpened with steel, is the way laughter in the office turns into secrets outside of it. The way inside jokes become inside lies. Emily's face blanched, her lips parting as though to speak. But no words came. A faint flush crept up her neck, betraying her composure. Daniel leaned forward, his voice low but urgent. Sophia, that's enough. But she ignored him. Her voice grew stronger, resonating with the force of every sleepless night, every dismissed suspicion. For months I doubted myself. I thought I was paranoid, insecure. He told me I was imagining things. Her eyes flicked to Daniel. Didn't you, Daniel? The room was silent, waiting, watching. Daniel opened his mouth but closed it again, unable to summon a denial that didn't sound hollow. His jaw clenched, his polished facade slipping. Sophia turned back to the group, her tone calm, almost conversational, but laced with venom. But tonight you've all seen it yourselves. The glances, the way they finish each other's thoughts, the way he looks at her, as if I'm invisible. Every word landed like a hammer strike. Colleagues shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between Daniel and Emily, unsure where to look. The honored manager, once the focus of the evening, sat rigid, his farewell dinner hijacked by the unraveling of another man's life. Emily finally found her voice, soft and trembling. Sophia, you're misunderstanding. Am I? Sophia cut in, her tone so sharp it sliced the air. Then explain why his phone is always in his pocket at home, but always in your hand at the office. Explain the late-night messages that light up our bedroom in the dark. Explain why my husband suddenly became too tired for conversation with me, but never too tired for you. The restaurant air turned heavy, oppressive. The sound of someone setting down a wine glass echoed louder than it should have. Daniel shot to his feet, anger flickering in his eyes. This is inappropriate, he snapped. This is a professional dinner. Sophia rose too, slower, calmer, her emerald dress catching the golden light as she faced him. "You're right," she said, her voice low but steady. "This is inappropriate. What you've done to our marriage, to our vows, that's what's inappropriate. What you've done in the shadows, while pretending to be the man everyone here thinks you are, that's what's inappropriate." Gasps rippled through the table. Some colleagues avoided eye contact, staring into their plates. Others couldn't help but watch, transfixed by the rawness of the moment. Emily's face was crimson now, her hands trembling as she reached for her glass of water. She whispered something, an apology or a denial. No one could tell, but the sound was swallowed by the silence pressing down on everyone. Sophia's final words were quiet, almost tender, but laced with finality. "So let's not pretend anymore. Tonight, everyone sees the truth. You're not just losing a colleague tonight," she said, her gaze sweeping the room one last time. "You're watching a marriage end." She set her glass down with delicate precision, the faint clink echoing like a gavel strike. The room remained suspended in stunned silence. The farewell dinner had transformed into a courtroom, the verdict delivered, the sentence unspoken, but absolute. And with that, Sophia turned, her composure unshaken, leaving behind a room full of wide eyes, whispered murmurs, and two guilty faces that no longer had anywhere to hide. The silence shattered all at once. Whispers burst across the table like sparks from a fire, colleagues leaning toward one another, eyes wide, lips moving quickly. Some tried to mask their curiosity. Others gave in shamelessly, their gazes darting between Daniel, Emily, and Sophia like spectators at a theater watching the climax of a play. The farewell dinner, once filled with laughter, had transformed into a stage for betrayal. Emily's hand trembled as she set her water glass down, her knuckles pale. "Sophia, please," she whispered, her voice so thin it was nearly drowned by the murmurs. "You don't understand." But Sophia didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than Emily's words, her poise a weapon sharper than any accusation. Daniel, however, could not contain himself. His voice rose, low at first, but growing in desperation. "Enough," he barked, his eyes flashing at Sophia. "You've embarrassed me. You've embarrassed yourself. Do you think this helps anyone? Do you think making a scene proves anything?" Sophia's head tilted slightly, her calm composure untouched. "It proves everything," she replied, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "It proves what you've tried to hide, and it proves that I will no longer be silent." Gasps rippled across the table again. Some colleagues shifted uncomfortably, staring into their plates as if wishing the ground would swallow them whole. Others, unable to help themselves, leaned in closer, captivated by the unraveling. The honored manager, sitting stiffly at the head of the table, cleared his throat, attempting to redirect the moment. "Perhaps we should—" But his words were drowned by Daniel's sharp retort. "Sophia, not here. Not now." His face was flushed, sweat beating at his temples. "This is not the place." Sophia's lips curved into the faintest, coldest smile. "It's exactly the place, because it was here, among these people, that you paraded your loyalty while hiding your betrayal. Why should the truth be confined to whispered corners when the lies lived in plain sight?" The room fell into uneasy silence again. No one dared interrupt. The tension was unbearable, yet no one moved to end it. Emily's voice cracked as she tried once more to defend herself. "It wasn't," she began, but the words faltered. She looked at Daniel, her eyes pleading for him to intervene, to shield her. But Daniel's gaze was cold, his fury now turning toward her as much as toward his wife. "You should have stayed out of this," he hissed under his breath, though everyone heard it. "You've made it worse." The betrayal within the betrayal cut through the room. Sophia caught it, her eyes narrowing, not with surprise, but with confirmation. She had known all along that selfishness would eventually devour him. Tonight, he proved her right. Colleagues began excusing themselves quietly. A pair slipped out toward the restroom. Another couple whispered hurried goodbyes, unable to withstand the discomfort. The table thinned, but the tension remained, thick and immovable. One brave voice, a colleague seated near Sophia, spoke hesitantly. Sophia, maybe, maybe it's best to take this privately. She turned toward them, her tone polite but unyielding. I appreciate your concern, but privacy was never an option the moment my marriage was dragged into this office by them. Her gaze flicked between Daniel and Emily. Why should I grant silence to a betrayal that was never silent? Daniel slammed his fist lightly against the table, the sound sharp but powerless. Enough, Sophia, sit down. You're making a fool of yourself. But it was he who looked the fool now, red-faced, sweating, his polished charm stripped bare before an audience that once admired him. The murmurs around the table shifted from shock to judgment, whispers tinged with disapproval, disappointment. Sophia rose fully from her chair, her posture regal, her dignity untouchable. She set her napkin down on the table with deliberate care. I've said what I came to say, she declared softly. You may cling to your lies if you wish, but not with me. The words hung in the air like a verdict. She turned and stepped away from the table, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. Each step steady, unhurried. She did not look back, not once. Her exit carried more power than any argument, leaving behind only the sound of whispers swelling into a storm. Daniel stood abruptly, chasing after her, his chair toppling backward with a thud. Emily sat frozen, abandoned, her eyes wide and glassy as she stared down at the table, the weight of judgment crashing over her. The farewell dinner was no longer a celebration. It was ashes. The night air outside the restaurant was sharp, cool, a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of the dining room. The golden glow of the chandeliers spilled through the glass doors, but Sophia had already stepped beyond it, standing on the cobblestone path lined with small hedges and dim lanterns. Her breath came steady, her posture tall, her emerald dress catching in the soft evening breeze. Behind her, the door swung open with a violent push. Daniel stormed out, his footsteps quick, his voice rising. What the hell was that, Sophia? She didn't flinch. Slowly, she turned to face him, her eyes calm but glacial. That, she said evenly, was the truth. Daniel's hands curled into fists at his sides, his composure cracking. You humiliated me in front of everyone, my colleagues, my manager, the entire office. Do you realize what you've done? Sophia's lips pressed into a faint smile, one that carried no warmth. Yes, I ended the charade you've been parading for months. You did the humiliating, Daniel. I only pointed it out. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You could have talked to me at home, in private. But no, you had to make a spectacle. Like some vindictive. Vindictive, Sophia cut in, her tone sharp as glass. You betrayed me, Daniel. You lied to me, dismissed me, made me feel insane for seeing what was right in front of me. And now you want to accuse me of cruelty because I refused to protect your image? She shook her head, her gaze piercing. I've spent too long protecting you while you destroyed us. Daniel faltered, his mouth opening but closing again. The practiced charm that served him so well inside the restaurant seemed useless out here. The truth clung to him like a stain that no excuse could wash away. Sophia's voice softened, though it carried more power than his raised tone. Tell me, Daniel, how long? How long has it been, Emily? He looked away, staring toward the street where headlights glowed faintly in the distance. It's not what you think. Don't lie to me, Sophia interrupted. Her voice was low but unyielding. Not now. You've taken enough from me. Give me the one thing I'm owed, the truth. Daniel's jaw tightened. He swallowed hard, then exhaled. The words dragged out of him like poison. A year, maybe a little more. For the first time, Sophia's face faltered, not with shock, but with the heavy confirmation of what she already knew. Her shoulders straightened again, her strength coiling back into place. A year, she repeated quietly, tasting the bitterness of the admission. A year of my life wasted on a man who didn't even have the decency to admit it. Daniel's tone shifted, desperation creeping in. It wasn't about you. I still love you, Sophia. She was just a distraction? Sophia finished for him, her voice dripping with disdain. A thrill, a shiny little toy to feed your ego while you kept me at home, waiting like a fool? Don't insult me by pretending you love me. Love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't destroy without remorse. The restaurant doors opened again briefly. Emily stepped out, her eyes darting between them, her expression strained with guilt. Daniel, she began softly, maybe we should. Sophia turned her head sharply, her voice cutting through the night like a blade. Not another word. Emily froze, her cheeks burning, then retreated back inside, the door closing behind her with a muted thud. Sophia returned her gaze to Daniel. You see, even now she runs, she hides, and you chase after anyone who makes you feel bigger than you are. You were never the man I thought I married. Daniel's voice cracked, raw with frustration. So what now, huh? You want to throw away everything we built? All these years, just like that? Sophia stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his, unwavering. You threw it away the first time you chose her over me. Every lie, every late night, every dismissal, you ended us long before tonight. I'm just the one who finally had the courage to say it out loud. The lantern light flickered against her face as she delivered the final blow. We're done, Daniel. The marriage is over, and I won't let you make me small ever again. She turned then, her heels clicking against the stone path, each step carrying her further away from the man who once defined her world. Daniel stood frozen, his mouth half open, his anger swallowed by the weight of her resolve. The night air was cold, but Sophia felt a strange warmth rising in her chest. Not joy, not yet, but the fierce clarity of liberation. For the first time in a long time, the chains were gone. The house was quiet when Sophia returned later that night. She slipped off her heels at the door, the soft thud of leather against wood echoing in the stillness. For a long moment she stood in the foyer, breathing in the silence, letting it wash over her. It was not the silence of absence, nor the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of peace, the absence of lies. She moved through the room slowly, her hand trailing against the familiar furniture. The photographs on the walls stared back at her. Smiling vacations, anniversary dinners, holidays wrapped in ribbons of false happiness. Once those images had been a comfort. Now they were relics of a life that no longer belonged to her. She paused at one frame, the glass cool beneath her fingers, then turned it face down on the shelf. Upstairs, she changed into something soft, something hers alone. No emerald dress, no carefully chosen jewelry to prove her worth. Just comfort. She poured herself a glass of water and settled by the window, the city lights blinking faintly in the distance. For the first time in months, perhaps years, her chest felt light. Daniel had not followed her home. She didn't expect him to. By the time she had walked away from him outside the restaurant, she knew the fight was over. His protests, his excuses, his half-hearted pleas, they had all sounded hollow against the clarity of her own voice. Whatever he had tried to salvage was too little, too late. At the office, word would spread. She didn't need to wonder. She knew. The colleagues who had once admired Daniel would whisper about the man who had been unmasked, his reputation fractured beyond repair. Emily would not escape the judgment either. She would bear the scarlet letter of being the other woman, her ambition forever shadowed by scandal. Perhaps they would cling to each other in the aftermath, bonded not by love but by shared shame. Or perhaps their bond would wither under the weight of reality. Either way, Sophia no longer cared. Their story was no longer hers to carry. Her own story, however, was just beginning. The next morning she rose with the dawn. Pale sunlight streamed through the curtains, painting the room in soft gold. She brewed her coffee slowly, savoring the rich aroma, the simple ritual grounding her in the present. For once, she did not check her phone for excuses or alibis. For once, she did not wonder if Daniel's late nights were filled with betrayal. Instead, she opened a notebook she had abandoned months ago, its pages blank and waiting. She began to write, not about Daniel, not about Emily, not about betrayal, but about herself, about the things she had once loved and the dreams she had put aside, painting classes she had long postponed, travels she had delayed, friendships she had neglected while keeping up appearances. Each line was a promise to herself, each word a seed planted in soil long ignored. She felt the pain, of course. Betrayal left scars that no resolution could erase overnight. But alongside the pain was something stronger, something fiercer: resolve. She would not let his choices define her. She would not let his betrayal become the story of her life. Later that week, she walked into a cafe she hadn't visited in years, one she used to frequent before marriage consumed her. The barista smiled in recognition, surprised to see her again. She ordered her favorite drink, one Daniel used to mock as too sweet, and sat by the window with a book, reclaiming small pieces of herself that had been buried. Her phone buzzed once, then twice. Daniel's name lit up the screen, his messages unread. She placed the phone face down on the table, her smile faint but steady. The power was hers now, not in punishing him, not in holding grudges, but in choosing to move forward without him. On Sunday morning, she stood by her balcony, watching the sunrise spread across the horizon. The sky blazed in streaks of pink and orange, bold and unapologetic. Sophia closed her eyes and breathed deeply, the cool air filling her lungs. When she opened them again, the light touched her face, warm and radiant. It was not the end, it was the beginning. She stepped forward into the day, her steps light, her heart unburdened. Whatever came next, freedom, discovery, even love again, would be on her terms. The chapter with Daniel was closed, its ink permanent but no longer binding. Ahead of her stretched unwritten pages, blank and waiting. And this time the story would be hers alone.